Hi everyone, it's Vicky here and welcome to a new card making video where I will be creating 3 cards using some of my favorite products from the latest Altenew release. So I have some of the stamps, the dies, the stencils here, and let's start with the first card. For this one I will be using this set of stencils, and this is 5 stencils in one. This is going to give you a beautiful flower composition. As you can see here, this is the die, by the way. And every one of those stencils has a number on top, so you know which way you can go. It doesn't have to be that way, but I'm trying to show you that there is the number up here. Hopefully you can see that through the camera. And when I am using layering stencils, I just like to use my MISTI, not for stamping, but that corner is really helpful to align the stencils every time, so you can place them this way, one on top of the other. However, keep in mind that this set of stencils is not going to align perfectly every time because the first 2 layers will, but the next ones will give you way more designs on top of them, and you will see what I mean. Anyway, for this one I'm going with purples, and I have chosen here 3 of my favorite colors that I have in my collection, as well as 2 shades of green. So I'm starting with the mini blending tools and the first layer of stencils, and I'm going to apply the first color. Now here I wanted to share something that I like to do. I'm too lazy to grab a mat for my ink pad so that it doesn't move around, but notice how I make sure that as I wipe my blending tool over it, I just swipe it towards my MISTI so the ink pad doesn't move around. You see how sturdy it is, even though it is directly on top of my glass mat. That's just my way when I'm too lazy to grab any anti-slippery mats and stuff. Also, one more tip: before I lift that stencil, I like to clean it as it is. So I'm going to lift it now and move on to the second stencil. And you know how it goes from now on. There are 3 stencils for the flowers and 2 stencils for the leaves and stems, but in some of those stencils you will find also little images that are going to help you do the center of the flowers. So again, I'm cleaning up and then moving on to the 3rd layer, and now I'm going to move on to an even darker shade of purple. And at the bottom of the stencil, if you notice, there are open areas. Try to avoid them because these are the areas for the center of the flowers. So the idea is to lift it a little bit towards the top, and then it's going to fit perfectly on top of the center. I'm going to leave it for now, and we'll continue with the green parts of my image, and then I will come back and do the centers. So for the green parts, the leaves and the stems, I'm starting with my lighter green, which is green filled, and then I will move on to a slight darker shade, which is Shadow Creek. Don't be afraid to use way darker colors than your first layer of coloring. This is going to bring your image so much into life. So look how gorgeous it looks at the moment, and that was just by playing with inks over stencils, one after another. Now I'm going to place the matching die on top and run it through my die cutting machine, and I have this gorgeous flower composition which is perfect for any type of card. Now I'm going to work on my background, and I have a panel here which I'm going to mist lightly with water, and then I'm going to use one of the new 3D embossing folders and run it through my die cutting machine. This is going to give a beautiful background. I find that when you use a white panel as your background, if you use a 3D embossing folder, it is going to take it to the next level without making your background look busy. Now I want to add some more interest on the background, that's why I'm swiping a little bit of that yellow. This is the one that I used for the center of the flowers, so it matches the focal point. I swiped a little bit on my glass mat, added some water, and now I'm adding some splatters at the background. And I'm also going to use my blending tool, and with the same color of ink, I'm going to go over the embossing folder in some areas very lightly, which is going to bring that texture even more to life. So I put everything together on top of a white card base that's 4 1/4 by 5 1/2, and behind my flowers I do have foam tape, so it is a little bit raised. Now I'm going to add some finishing touches, so I'm going with a few of those golden pearls. And because I don't know when to stop with little details, I'm also adding some white droplets at the center of the flower. I added my sentiment from the wild geranium stamp set, and here are some close-up photos. Now another favorite from this release are the Boho vases. I find them absolutely unique. Look how gorgeous these are, and actually you can use those dies as lanterns as well. So in this case, for this card, I'm going to use them as they were intended, and to cut out the vases I'm going to use this luxurious cardstock. This is by Simon Says Stamp, and by the way, just like always, you will find everything I'm using linked down below. For the leaves and branches I use 3 different shades of green, just to give some variation on my card since I have the exact same cardstock for the 3 vases. And now for the first one I placed everything directly on top of my card base, so vase and leaves stay completely flat. Now for the second one I'm using foam tape at the back, so this is going to be a little bit raised to add dimension. And then again for the third vase I went dimensional as well. So you can leave it as it is and stick it on top of your card base, or if you are like me and you want to add something extra on your card, you can cut out a part of the panel and make it smaller. Now at the bottom I'm going to stick one more strip of the same cardstock that I used for the vases. And I'm also going to chop a little bit from the top. I will chop off some parts of those big leaves as well. I don't really mind. If you do mind, don't do that, just use it as it is as a panel. However, my idea is to leave some space at the bottom where I can stamp my sentiment. So for the sentiment I went with the Boho arrow stamp set that gives you many sentiments to play with, and I went with Missing You. You can embellish your card if you like by adding a few gems here and there, just like I did here, and here are some close-up photos. And let's move on to the third and last card for today, where I will be playing with the Boho arrow stamp set and the matching dies. Now this is again another unique one, and that's why I love it from this release. And for this one I'm not going to color anything, I'm just going to use heat embossing. So I'm starting with a blue cardstock and I'm going to stamp on top my stamp by using Versamark ink, and I'm going to apply silver embossing powder. And of course you can do all sorts of color combinations. You can go with gold embossing powder or any other color of embossing powder. So the idea that I had for this card was to use this beautiful design with partial die cutting. So I'm going to bring in the matching die, place it on top, I will secure it with some low tack tape, and then I'm going to run it through my die cutting machine, making sure that I don't cut out the top part. So as I place it on my cutting mat, I'm going to make sure that this part from the arrow and above is outside of my cutting plates. Now lots of bulk up here, so run it through this way in your machine. So if you do it correctly, the top part is going to stay intact while the bottom is going to separate. If there are some areas at the top that didn't cut all the way through, you can always help it out with your crafting knife, but it shouldn't be a problem, just a few here and there. So one more big area here, and I'm ready to go. So you have a beautiful design that you can place on top of your card base, and I did use foam tape underneath. By the way, if this cardstock looks a little bit darker to you, it's because I went over it with my dye inks, just because I wanted to oversaturate it a little bit more. So here I'm embellishing my card by adding some silver pearls which match perfectly with the silver embossing powder. All that's left to do is to stick it on top of my card base and then add the sentiment. So here are some close-up photos on all the cards that I shared for today. I hope that you had fun, that you got inspired. Links to everything I used can be found down below. Make sure to visit my blog as this is part of a blog hop and there are many prizes to be won. Thank you all so much for joining me today and I'll see you all next time.